Rick and Morty breaks reality constantly. Timelines collapse, universes implode, death barely matters.
Wow, Rick!
But one episode went too far, not because it was shocking or dark, but because it nearly destroyed canon, the one thing holding the show together. It crossed a line Rick and Morty almost never crosses, and if the writers hadn't walked it back, the show wouldn't exist as it does today. Most fans laughed. Almost no one noticed what nearly broke. On the surface, Rick and Morty looks like a show with no rules at all. Stories reset without warning, characters die off screen and reappear later, and entire civilizations are wiped out for the sake of a punchline. Nothing seems permanent, and that illusion makes the show feel like pure chaos. But that chaos is deceptive.
I don't like how meta this is getting, Rick.
Shut up, Morty. You're 14. You watch videos of people on YouTube reacting to f***ing YouTube. I'll be the judge of when we get too meta.
In reality, Rick and Morty operates on what can best be described as a soft canon system. The show allows extreme episodic freedom, but only within invisible boundaries the writers rarely cross. Certain events permanently shape the world. Certain choices follow characters forward, and certain rules exist specifically to keep the story from collapsing under its own absurdity. The most important rule is simple. Rick matters because his actions have weight. When Rick makes a decision, it changes something. If he could do anything without consequence, he would stop being a character and become a gag machine. Canon exists to prevent that.
I spent my life hunting this guy, Morty. This is the closest I've ever been to catching Rick Prime. It's impossible. Hunting him destroyed me, Morty, but now we're gonna do it together. You and me. It's gonna take over your life, Morty.
It preserves stakes, emotional investment, and narrative tension. Not by restricting creativity, but by giving chaos meaning. For years, the show balanced this perfectly. The rules were flexible, but never meaningless, until one moment came dangerously close to breaking that balance. Before we talk about what nearly crossed the line, we need to clear up a common misconception. Rick and Morty has always played with canon. The show openly mocks continuity, jokes about storytelling structure, and even has characters, especially Rick, call out narrative shortcuts in real time. On the surface, it looks like nothing is sacred and no rule is ever taken seriously. But those moments are not random, they are controlled. When Rick and Morty breaks canon, it usually does so in very specific, carefully contained ways. Sometimes the break is isolated to a single universe, ensuring that the consequences never spill into the broader narrative. Other times, it is framed purely as a joke, with no lasting implications beyond the moment itself. And in cases where the show does take a bigger swing, that disruption is often counterbalanced later by long-term consequences that quietly restore narrative stability. This precision is easy to miss because the humor moves fast. The audience laughs, the story ends, and everything feels normal again. But beneath the comedy, the framework stays intact. The rules may bend, but they do not disappear. That is exactly why the episode Never Rick and Morty was different. It did not simply play with canon or stretch it for a clever joke. It flirted with the idea that canon itself could be ignored entirely. And that shift, from bending the rules to erasing them, posed a threat the show had never faced before. On first watch, this feels exactly like peak Rick and Morty. It is clever, meta, and sharply self-aware. The jokes come fast, the pacing is tight, and it openly plays with storytelling expectations, directly challenging the idea that serialized narrative even matters. For a show built on bending structure and mocking tradition, none of this seems unusual at first. Rick and Morty has always thrived on this kind of commentary. Characters regularly acknowledge plot mechanics, question emotional beats, and call out narrative shortcuts as they happen. Rick himself often behaves as if he understands the rules of storytelling better than the story does. This self-awareness is part of the show's identity, and it usually works because it is controlled. What makes this different is the implication hiding underneath the humor. It suggests something far more dangerous than flexible continuity. That canon itself is optional, not bendable, not reinterpretable, optional. It flirts with the idea that continuity can be rewritten, ignored, or overridden without any real cost. If that idea were true, the consequences would be devastating. Rick's growth would stop mattering. His moments of vulnerability would lose weight because they could be undone at any time. Past sacrifices would become meaningless. Character arcs would flatten, and emotional investment would slowly disappear. The show would still be loud and funny, but it would lose direction. Chaos would no longer serve a purpose. It would become the point. That is why this was not just risky, but existentially dangerous. Rick and Morty survives on the tension between chaos and consequence. Remove consequence, and the chaos turns into noise. This came closer than anything else to crossing that line, quietly threatening the very framework that gives the show its power. There is a specific narrative choice here that comes closer than anything else in the series to breaking the system entirely. It suggests that storylines, universes, and even consequences themselves can be swapped, replaced, or discarded at will. Not through the established logic of the multiverse, not through consequence-driven science fiction rules that the show usually relies on, but through pure narrative convenience. That distinction is what makes this moment so dangerous. Rick and Morty's multiverse works because actions still matter within each reality. A universe may be abandoned, but what happened there remains emotionally real. Choices carry weight, trauma accumulates, and consequences follow characters forward, even when the setting changes. This quietly flirts with the opposite idea, that realities themselves are disposable in a way that invalidates emotional stakes altogether. If a universe can be overwritten simply because the story demands it, then nothing inside that universe truly matters. Characters can be reset without cost. Loss becomes temporary. Growth becomes reversible. And when that happens, investment dies. The audience may still laugh, but they stop caring. That is the line this steps right up to, where the multiverse stops being a framework for meaningful chaos and starts becoming a shortcut that empties the story of consequence. Here is where the genius and the danger fully collide. It is genuinely funny. The pacing is fast, almost relentless, leaving little room to pause or reflect. The jokes land back to back, and the meta-commentary keeps your attention focused on the cleverness of the moment rather than the meaning beneath it.
Hey, wait! What race are you guys?
We're neither! See?
Yeah, take my word for it. We just have regular nipples.
Weapon systems engaged.
Oh, in your dreams, you have weapon systems.
Rick, you said we were going to a movie?
We are, Morty. All right, Beta Shit 7. You just got saved by the bell, bitch.
You are encouraged to admire how smart it feels, not to question what it is quietly suggesting. By the time you realize what is being implied, it is already over. The story moves on, the credits roll, and the show returns to business as usual. Most viewers walk away with a single takeaway. That was clever. It feels like another example of Rick and Morty pushing boundaries in a way only it can. Very few viewers stop to ask the more dangerous question: what does this mean for the show itself? What happens if the ideas introduced here are taken seriously rather than treated as a one-off experiment? This kind of misdirection is something Rick and Morty relies on constantly. Humor has always been the camouflage that allows the show to explore risky ideas without alarming the audience. But in this case, the implication was simply too large to ignore. And the fact that the show quietly adjusted course afterwards suggests the writers noticed it too. If the show had fully committed to what this implied, Rick and Morty would have lost something essential: tension. Tension is what makes chaos meaningful. It is the reason danger feels real and why the audience stays emotionally invested. Without it, nothing truly matters. Why fear consequences if they can be undone at any moment? Why care about character arcs if they can be overwritten whenever the story demands it? And why invest emotionally if the show itself signals that it does not care about what came before? Those questions strike at the heart of serialized storytelling, and Rick and Morty is no exception. Had this implication become permanent, the series would have turned into a parody of itself. Not satire and not commentary on storytelling, but parody. Endless self-referential noise that mimics depth without actually having any. Rick would stop being dangerous because danger only exists when actions carry lasting consequences. Morty would stop growing because growth requires memory, accumulation, and scars that do not vanish. Canon would still exist on the surface, but only as decoration, not as structure. The show would look the same, sound the same, and joke the same, but it would feel hollow. And that is why this moment mattered, because the writers understood that once tension is gone, the entire foundation collapses. What makes this moment so fascinating is not the mistake itself, but how quietly it was corrected. There was no announcement, no public acknowledgement, and no dramatic retcon designed to undo the damage. The show did not apologize, and it did not explain itself. Instead, Rick and Morty did something far more deliberate. It subtly reasserted its rules. In what followed, consequences returned. Character decisions began to carry weight again. Actions stopped feeling interchangeable, and continuity quietly re-anchored itself without ever being called out. Nothing was highlighted for the audience. No one turned to the camera to clarify what counted and what did not. The correction happened invisibly, woven back into the fabric of the show. Importantly, this was not erased. It still exists. The jokes still land. The events still happened. But the way those events are framed changed. Their implications were softened. The dangerous idea that canon itself was optional was gently walked back, neutralized without confrontation. The message was subtle but clear. This was the boundary. This was how far the show was willing to go, and no further. By choosing restraint instead of spectacle, the writers protected the long-term integrity of the series. And that quiet decision, more than any big twist or reveal, is likely what saved Rick and Morty from breaking itself. This reveals something important. Rick and Morty is not reckless. It is controlled chaos. The writers know exactly where the line is, and this moment showed how close they are willing to get without crossing it. Canon is not the enemy of creativity. It is the reason creativity works. For a brief moment, the show nearly forgot that. Rick and Morty survived because it pulled back at the last second. This still exists, and the jokes still land, but the show quietly chose stability over spectacle. So the next time you watch Rick and Morty, pay attention not to what breaks reality, but to what doesn't, because that is where the real rules are hiding. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, subscribe for more deep dives into hidden storytelling mechanics, and let me know in the comments which episode you think came closest to breaking the show. I will see you in the next one.